All right, we got a special treat for you today. We're going to go back to our last episode and do the differentiation discussion, part 2.
Welcome to the Leading Edge in Emotionally Focused Therapy with your hosts, Dr. James Hawkins and Dr. Ryan Rana. EFT is a dynamic model that humbles even the most seasoned therapists. Together, we want to come alongside you as you continually push the leading edge of your understanding and application of this wonderful model developed by Dr. Sue Johnson.
All right, well, today is kind of like a cool moment. I remember when we first started this years ago, it was 4 guys in a room talking about racial conversations. And now we have a person whose name is actually on our episode, but we never can get him on here. It's none other than George Fowler himself, the author of Sacred Stress, what's the other one about connections, EFFT with family. He's traveling all around the world doing some cool stuff. Foreplay Radio with Lori Watson on the mission. Big G, the G spot himself, George Fowler. Welcome here, George.
All right, baby. I made it back to the leading edge.
Yeah, man.
Proud of you guys, what you're doing. Some cool stuff.
Thanks, G, man. And me and Ryan definitely love to give honor to whom honor is due. And we definitely know, one, you've mentored both of us, and we know a lot of the ideas and concepts we talk about is, one, comes from you, but also just the space you create to really invite inclusiveness in EFT, to like everyone, let's come together and work on this project to be on a mission to help people. And your willingness to say, let's just ask hard questions and really just kind of like get really finely nuanced on those things. And so, yeah.
It's a win-win conversation, right? When people around you are encouraging and asking questions, and together you're problem solving. Same with this conversation today, right? Differentiation, attachment. It could be a win-win, baby.
All right. But over here, Ryan, you've been getting a lot of information from the last podcast.
I have. There's something about this topic that really activates folks, and all positive. I appreciate it. It'd be okay if it wasn't positive, but all the contacts were positive, but there were several. So something about this topic of differentiation, individuation, fear of codependency versus attachment, connection. Mm-hmm. It's such a dichotomy. It's hard to balance and to talk about. I know I want to have another one after this because I want to go back through some of the terms, but we'll save that one for next time. Okay. Because I asked George to say, will you listen to this? I think it's the only one who's ever listened to, not to call him out here. But he says he listened to it, and he says he had some things he wants to add. So
I have to admit, I was shocked when George pulled out his phone. He pulled out our podcast episode. He was like, he asked about our last episode. I'm like, I started talking, like, wait, how do you know about our last episode? Wait, anyway, George.
Hey, listen, I've never listened to one of my own podcasts. It's not a personal thing. I'm just not a big podcast person. But this is some important stuff.
Well, I mean, you got a couple million listeners over on your other podcast, so.
And I haven't listened to those either, so it's, it is what it is.
All right, George. What do you want to I want to invite you to kind of join us in this conversation. What sticks out for you?
Well, there has been this great debate between the two, and it's been separate camps. Mm-hmm. And I think what you're trying to do is so healthy. You're really just trying to build bridges, which is, to me, the true spirit of what EFT is trying to do anyway. But, I do a lot of training with Esther Perel, Ellen Bader, a lot of people that really lead with differentiation. And I do think there's a piece of that that I've been pulling more into EFT that's made EFT even more powerful and more clearer. So that's really what I wanted to talk about. How do we apply some of this stuff, differentiation in session?
I appreciate that. I had the privilege last week. I was with the Cape Cod Institute. Shout out to them, doing some great work out there. Mm-hmm. I know you've been out there, G. And I had the privilege of actually getting to have a conversation with Dick Schwartz, the founder of IFS. And it was great to hear him talk about his journey with Sue and how they first began off. And him and I, just as IFS therapists and EFT therapists, talking about our different ideas and views. And we were also able to have great conversation around some of our similarities. But I can tell you, he did help me kind of push me and refine some parts about me, about how much do I truly honor the self in therapy? Mm-hmm. While I'm trying to do co-regulation, does that mean it completely throws out any kind of, contact with yourself and some forms of self-regulation? Yeah. So I appreciate it.
I do think there's a form of co-regulation in parts work, right? When you're doing parts within you, the little boy, the older adult you, the best, whatever it is, like that is co-regulation when you get some of that. Anyway, these are just distinctions in words.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I know I got some practical points. You got some you want to lead off, George, with kind of some? Or you want
I was just taking a note here. They looking at me. I was just going to, I don't know if I'm agreeing or disagreeing with Dick Schwartz, but I've trained with him before too. But, you know, I would probably agree with him. There's no such thing as co-regulation if you can't contact self. I mean, co-regulation by its very nature is the ability to put out a clear signal to other. If there's not some clarity within me, then we can't co-regulate. So I think he'd probably like that. What he may not like is to say there's no self without co-regulation. All those parts that you have, they're not just yours. They're accumulated from your years of relationships. They're adaptive in their very nature. And I think he kind of would agree with that. But anyway, we'll get philosophical there too far.
That was a good line, though, Ryan.
Even though I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, I did take notes on your podcast.
Whoa. Hey, nobody pull off the road here.
So there were a couple of things I just want to highlight. I mean, the first thing is, and James, you do this a lot explicitly, but even when you're emphasizing, Dick Schwartz is emphasizing how to help people self-regulate, you're co-regulating as you're teaching self-regulation, right? So again, there's these two are integrated, and they're kind of, you're going back and forth. And the second piece, I love some of the terms you put down, like calling it the negative cycle is what is codependency. Right, that's just a nice framework that you two are using, right? It's a negative cycle that creates this anxious kind of state. It's not what people naturally go into. We pathologize dependency because of unhealthy negative cycles, not because of who we are as human beings. So I just like that language. And I also wrote down block closeness is shallow co-regulation. Right, which again is another form of what we pathologize is really just defensiveness and what people do to protect themselves. You know, that's what the world sees when they say codependency, you know, what fails about it, and they're really talking about insecure attachment. So I just like the language in that you both used around that.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the positives. Where's the negatives?
No negatives. I want to get into what I think EFT can kind of stretch and grow into.
Well, let me ask you that. I wrote that down. You said you've pulled a couple pieces of differentiation over into EFT, which has made it better. I want to hear about these pieces.
Yeah, I don't think, again, I think this is true to EFT. We're always trying to make the implicit explicit. So what I found myself doing more of is really, and this started when I worked a lot with defenses. When you're working with defenses, you want to start off, people get the healthy function of why they do what they do. Like, we don't want to be jerks. We don't be critical. We don't put up walls. We do this to survive. You know, as you start to help people see that, I think the next step is, can you start taking ownership for the impact of that when you do that, right? So if I know I need a wall to help me feel safe, I also need to get what that wall is going to do to my partner. You know, as a therapist, I have to help people see the timing of when their defenses kick in. So if I'm working with you and Ryan as my couple, and Ryan's my mission, and I'm getting Ryan to go deeper into, you know, he's feeling like a failure as a withdrawer, and you interrupt and you're like, yeah, Ryan, but you wouldn't feel this way if you would just kind of, you know, work a little harder, if you'd hold me tight. Like, that live block that you're jumping in, I've been helping people say, well, hold on a second, James. Right? Because again, I can see you trying to motivate change, which is a good thing. But can you take ownership, which is what the goal, can you start to see the timing of what you're doing? That you're choosing what you want, you're changing the mission, and you're giving him a failure when he's trying to do something new. Like, when people start seeing they actually have power over these moves, like, it creates more movement than just co-regulation. Right, when people can do that. So I've been having a lot of fun with that.
And that's big, what you even just said, to have clarity and power is a power of where we're kind of saying it does empower the self now. I'm not just a victim of the cycle or a victim of my partner's protection or when they disappoint me. Hey, well, hold on a second. I'm a person with feeling and needs too. I make moves in this relationship too. What's the purpose of my moves? What's the function of my moves? What's the hope in them? What's the impact to me? What's the impact to my partner? I don't lose myself in the attachment-related distress.
Exactly.
All right. I'm trying to think through how I feel about the word ownership. I like the word impact maybe a little bit better, but I want you to convince me. How do you balance ownership versus shame?
Ooh.
I think you need to connect to the shame. differentiation is also about seeing the impact to self. I think that's also a great part of the work. Like I could see how I need a wall to make myself feel safe as a withdrawer. But I also need to see the cost of that wall to myself. When I start to hide me, I tell those vulnerable parts of me they're not worthy of being seen. I do to me what maybe my parents did to me that got me in this mess in the first time. So my taking ownership is saying, wait, I get why I do it. That's not feeding shame. I'm not blaming myself for doing it. But I see the impact, and I got to start saying to myself, that's not okay. I can't keep doing that to myself and the people I love, to have this severe impact. So that's what I mean by ownership. Again, language matters. Find words that fit for people. But that's really when people do like that word, they actually feel more power. They're like, wait a second, there is something I can do. I'm not just totally dependent on my partner responding to me. Oh, okay. I actually have some influence in the outcome of change here because I can control this part of it.
So some people find it empowering.
Hugely.
To say, okay, I can own this regardless of what my partner does or doesn't do, which has a differentiated kind of aspect. Okay.
I love that you're highlighting that because I think too many therapists push ownership as something I want to give my partner to make my partner more hopeful. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about the individual taking ownership because they feel like they have more control and a better ability to influence change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just want to highlight for the listeners, in case you're new, knowing George, order matters. And so if you just start off with, or I've even seen other therapists who put this out in print, you got to own your moves. You got to own. If you don't start with the good reasons they have to do it,
yeah, that's right.
Now the ownership is going to actually spin people out. Because if you don't have the space that validation provides, most people want their partners to take ownership, but not themselves.
Exactly.
But what you're saying is you're walking in my shoes for a series of times before you're pushing for that impact/ownership. And then you're even highlighting that what you're owning here doesn't just hurt your partner, it actually hurts you. You're missing out on something great.
I would change the order.
All right.
Running out of time. But
well, no, we're not out of time, but I want to take a break, and I want to see what you mean by that.
Let's
George.
hear that order.
How would you change that order?
Let's hear that order.
Do you like the content that you're hearing on this podcast?
Yes.
Well, we invite you to join us on successandvulnerability.com, along with George Fowler and other EFT therapists and supervisors, where you get more thorough insight into these concepts and actually get to see it done. Once again, join us on successandvulnerability.com. All right, George, how would you change that order?
I know you guys are shocked with my numbers and steps and everything, but my 3 steps to this one would be, it has to start off with you getting the healthy function of why you do what you do. Mm-hmm. That's what takes a lot of the energy out of the defenses, when you can honor the health that's driving the protection. I think if you're trying to get that person to look at self, you're already in view of self, stay in view of self. The second part is now you got to help that person see the cost to themselves. Can they start to take ownership for what the protection does to them? Mm-hmm. Right? So if you're angry because you want to motivate change, that's great. But what does the anger do to you? Right? It actually criticizes. There's no self-compassion, right? You're trying to motivate yourself by saying you suck. Right? That's not the greatest motivation. Right? Or as a withdrawer, we hide ourselves so we're not exposed, but what do we tell ourselves when we're hiding ourselves? We don't have value, or we're failing. Mm-hmm. So if you're in self, stay in self. Help the person see the impact of their move on themselves, right? I think that's the first taste people get of differentiation. The power of, wait a second, there is a cost to me. And I need to own that because it's not okay. You start to encourage that, stand up for themselves, right? To start saying, I could do something better. After you get the impact to self, it's easier to stretch it to start seeing the impact of other. Mm-hmm. Most therapists start with impact of other, right? That's where it's just coaching people to see, and they nod their head, but it's not empowering. It's just like they make the connection cognitively, but they're actually not taking ownership for it emotionally. To me, this is more of a bottom-up process.
Wait, are you saying impact on other or impact of other?
Impact on other.
On other, okay.
Yeah, so again, if we use wall, 1 is I see the function of it. 2 is I see the cost to me. 3 is I see the cost to my partner. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think that all that matters. Like you said, if you start off with 3, trying to just see how many withdrawers say, I know I shouldn't withdraw. I know it hurts my partner. I shouldn't be doing it, but they keep doing it because they haven't done those first 2 steps.
And pursuers, same way. I know I
Exactly.
shouldn't be critical. I know I shouldn't coach, but I can't help myself because if I don't do that, I'm just signing my death warrant.
Exactly.
So so tracking the function also has a very validating impact. If you're curious about that, it implies that I'm not crazy, that there is some good reason I'm doing this.
You have to start with that.
Okay.
If you bypass that, you're just getting people to apologize and not even understand why they're
Yeah,
apologizing.
and that's something that sounds great at a training.
Yep.
It actually takes a lot of discipline to do
Yep.
because you're working against the grain. It's actually what I want you to stop doing. So then for me to be able to willing and even safe with self to work counterintuitively, and let me look at the good reasons you have to do things that I know can't possibly work.
Listen, you guys are carrying this mission forward with honoring blocks and defenses. I think our field desperately needs it. I think EFT therapists who are listening, they do a good job of validating, but they don't make meaning out of the function. And that's the key to disarming blocks. You have to help people be curious about why they do it. You'll probably be the first person that has ever done that with them in their life. They've done this move their whole lives, and they don't even understand why they do it. So having a therapist connect with that first, that's gold.
And 100%, I think that leans into this conversation so well. In EFT, we're not always trying to make the partner fulfill all of their partner's whole world. Like, if we follow the tango, we're trying to get them to make a curious connection with themselves. And we run into so many blocks there. How many of you, that are listening, have a client, not even just to not get their partner to come and be curious with them. They don't get curious with themselves. And then now we are in a whole nother problem. When I think about the anxious attachment style, part of the formal name for that is preoccupied.
Right.
And part of the problem for them is they are preoccupied on other people meeting all of their emotional needs because they don't like themselves.
Yep.
And so we've got to get them to slow down and say, hold on. Can I just stay here with you? I see you looking at your partner, and I get the good reasons you look at them. You want them to see you, to understand to be there for you. But do you even get a chance to look at you? And what's it like to slow down and be with you? I don't like that. I don't like that at all.
Yeah, so if we're trying to apply that order to that, let's just do that right now.
Okay.
So what's the function of preoccupying on other, James?
Man, it's a really good way to get a break from the inner critic inside of me who doesn't like me.
Yep. And it forces interaction. Like something's going on.
Yep.
There's not that deadly silence where there's just this empty, dark, nobody sees me, which is terrifying. So I'd rather have a fight than have nothing.
Yep, it's engagement.
It's engagement.
Isn't it? I like what you're touching it because both the pursuer and the withdrawer have parts of themselves they don't like, and they put so much defense out of avoiding the places and parts of themselves that they don't like.
Right.
So the withdrawer wants the pursuer just to like me, don't have any problems with me. Let's stay in the happy zone because you're going to take me to a place where I see myself as a failure. So, or then the pursuer is kind of like, just do these things for me, show up for me, do this so I don't have to be alone with myself and realize I'm lonely because I'm unworthy and unlovable.
Yeah. I like what you're saying, but picking out our bias here, you got a little withdrawer bias going on because the 2 functions we highlighted early on were both negative, right?
Well, yeah.
Because let's try to be a little nicer. Preoccupation with other and forcing the conversation. What if it works? What if we can have this conversation and break through for this level of closeness I've always wanted? Like there's a hopeful.
That's the health in it, yeah.
I like
That's
that.
the function. So there's level 1 is like, what is that function? And warning, be careful that if you do point this function out, it's not always the negative. Like, what is the healthy intent of this? What is the hope that's back there somewhere?
It is also healthy to want to get away from pain that's not going to be responded to.
Right.
Right. Either way, it's a healthy intent. Right. The impact's a different ballgame.
All right. So we start off by the function, and then, but what is the cost to that person?
So important.
Yeah.
What is it?
Because that's what's not being seen.
With the preoccupation on others.
What's the cost? The self.
I think I lose contact with me.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then I'm not even able to really bring myself into the relationship, talk about what I need. It all becomes focused on keeping you happy or meeting your needs without and I don't, if I'm going with it, the positive one, I don't even get to take in the full joy of the relationship because I'm disconnected from it.
But this is where a lot of pursuers have avoidance strategies, right? It's the focus on other and criticism to motivate change. But to do that, the cost is I have to hide myself. I reject myself. I tell myself I don't have value, this fearful place inside of me. So you can see the avoidance strategy, even though the actions look very behavior pursuer-like.
I have to get rid of me and my needs to stay that focused on you.
Yep.
And I, am willing to come someone I don't even like, right? Like those slides we use on Pursuer World days where you kind of like become a monster that nobody actually wants to be. No one wants to be this critical person.
But
right?
it shows if you don't want it and you still keep going down that road, the power of the function of that protective move.
All right. So we got the function, we got the cost of self. Now what's the cost of the partner?
To stay preoccupied, kind of on that enmeshment kind of feel.
How does that affect our partners?
Man, it could put the partner in a spot to where
Pathologizes the partner.
that I like that one. It pathologizes. Then two, it's like they're always going to be failing at it, because if I keep kind of ignoring me and only focus on you, there's only so much you can do. And like even our research on like secure relationships between attunement, disruption, and repair, even on my best days, I probably can only get that right with 33% of the time or something we talk about with that. So, but this is what, Ryan, I think I took a good one from you. Couples in clinical distress demand perfection. They demand that perfection. I need you 100% all the time to be this way, show up for me. And that just puts the partner where I'm always failing. I can't do that.
I hope you guys see how timing matters. Like if you build that strong foundation with view of the function and you keep them in view of self and they start to see the cost for themselves and like, damn, this sucks. I want to change this. Then they see what it does to their partner. There's such good motivation to create healthy change. If you start off with number 3 first, you try to sell, can't you see what your actions are doing to the other person? You don't get that same buy-in, right? Which is exactly why I feel like this ownership, differentiation, choose the word you want. It's actually about power, choice, possibilities, right? It gives you more options.
For that person.
For that person.
Yeah, yeah.
And if that person has more options, the couple winds up having more options.
Yeah. All right, so you did an order, function, cost to self, cost to other.
Yep.
So what you're calling owner, we have not had this discussion off air, by the way. So we're just literally building this plane as we're flying. So what I'm hearing you say, George, if we're getting specific, is really almost just being more explicit about your process with them.
Yeah.
So instead of just saying, I see the good reasons you have, here's the impact, you're being a little bit more explicit. Can you notice what's happening right now? Which does put you to the edge of shame. Right? So how do you manage that?
Yeah, to me, it's when you're honoring the function, you're discharging the shame.
Okay.
Right? When you're giving people permission for their survival, when you say, hey, if I was in your shoes, I'd be doing the same thing. You would not have survived without this.
Right.
Could you imagine if that horrible stuff underneath didn't get protection? You wouldn't be here. So I think you connect to all that first and you really reduce the shame. I'm not going to go into having them see impact if they're going to go heavy into shame.
And then what I'm also hearing you say is you're relying pretty heavily on your alliance, that they're already seeing you as aligned, you're on my side, I know you have my back, and emotional attunement, right? If you're not emotionally attuned with someone and you try to get them to take ownership, that's going to have a very different result.
And I think as you go into that second phase to look at impact to self, you're going to expect all those blocks to show themselves where they're not going to want to do that. They don't got a lot of practice doing that. They're going to go back into getting critical or withdrawing, and you just got to ride those blocks. And each time you do that, you give them some success in their defenses. You strengthen that you resource them to stay longer in that new place.
Right. And so are you saying the ownership, this is the word you're putting in here, results in between the second and third steps there with cost to self, cost to, or impact on other?
Yeah, I think that's the part. I mean, in my own life, I think about if I'm not conscious, right, I'm just going to protect myself. When, you could explain my moves and I nod my head, but when I actually start to feel the impact, like, wait a second, this sucks for me, what I'm doing, and it sucks for my partner. I find great internal motivation to want to do that differently.
Right.
And to me, that's the self piece that we're trying to grow in EFT. We've always done it. We just haven't been super explicit with it. And I think we need to lead more in these conversations. We do differentiation beautifully well.
Yeah.
Step 3, step 5, this is all going into self, trying to get people to stand up for themselves, trying to get them to do things differently.
Yep. And we can be a bit reactive, right? Like, because the field is already so heavily differentiation, we have this other message of co-regulation and honoring emotion that we can maybe overcorrect a little bit.
But I think that's why EFT has to apologize all the time, like, because we have to so emphasize co-regulation. People think we don't do differentiation, which is like not true at all.
Or not that we don't do cognition. That's not true. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Meaning making is half of what we do, right?
But even in these 3 steps here with ownership, I mean, the first 2, you're actually walking around on my side of this.
Exactly.
So 2/3 of this actually is validating.
Yep.
The first one is that I have a series of good reasons for this to function. And the second one is you're saying, hey, Ryan, I see how you got here, but do you also see what this is doing to you? You deserve better. You deserve to have somebody show up for you here.
Yep.
And here's what the cost is. Is that right?
Yep. And even the third one, even though it goes into view of other and you feel bad for the costs, I think that the differentiation piece is I can make a choice to do that differently, right? I now see more clearly. It's a human thing. I choose my own survival at the cost to you, but I don't even know I'm doing it when it's happening. Now I do. My eyes have been opened. Once my eyes are open, it's a lot easier to say, I don't want to do that anymore. You deserve better, but it focuses on control and choice, which to me is what differentiation is about.
I like that. And it is a part of our work, right? You know, have you ever had a moment like when, I think in Move 2, we do a lot of that when we're assembling and putting together and we're like, wow, look at what you're doing here.
Yeah.
I love how you're starting to make contact and get clear on this part of you that normally you go away from.
Yeah.
And we really do help them get curious. How many times have each one of you maybe had that in your session where I just had this happen. I was working with a pursuer and I was just helping her really put her world together and you just saw this stunned look on her face. And I'm like, hey, I just kind of saw something come over your face. What's happening there? She says, I never take time to sit and look at this and be curious with myself, James.
Yeah.
I've never put this together. And to me, I'm like, no matter what her partner does or doesn't do, I have to take a moment and say, I really appreciate you doing that for you. Like, how many times in your life have you looked to other people and not only do they not turn away from, they turn away and they turn against you. And so you even learn to put these parts of you away and not like yourself so much. So I really appreciate your bravery today to stay here and get curious with a part of yourself. So that way, no matter what happens, at least now you have a new experience of you. That's amazing to me.
It's beautiful work. You're using yourself with co-regulation to strengthen her ability to self-regulate herself.
100%.
Right? And when she can see the impact to herself and she decides that's not okay and she stands up to say, I deserve better, right? That shift from self-criticism to self-compassion. I mean, we're always trying to do that in EFT. But when you can do that shift internally, it hugely increases your capacity to be more empathetic to your partner.
And to look towards relationship, because one of the struggles in attachment is we do look at view of self. So do you innately come into these moments saying, I'm an unlovable, unworthy person, I don't have what it takes? Well, then that's not going to make you want to do co-regulation because you don't have like any kind of regard or value for yourself. So then co-regulation goes off the table because why would I do that when I don't like me? Why would you even want to comfort me?
Ryan would always, when we would teach together, what I would always call step 5A.
Wait, is this when you assigned me to do the research and all the bad parts?
That's stuff you got to get through. What can I say, man? My brain doesn't retain half the stuff you retain.
Yeah.
But when I would always teach, especially pursuer softening, step 5, right? When you're step 5, you try to get a pursuer to go deeper and your withdrawer is responsive and that pursuer just keeps whacking away all attempts to co-regulate, that's a clear sign you got to work towards the self-regulation and the differentiation, right? I always call out a step 5A. Help the pursuer learn to be kinder to themselves, replace the criticism with compassion, right? That's exactly what you two have been talking about.
And that is one of George's, each one of us kind of has different things we do. That's where you go to the inner child or younger me, I remember the pursuer softening, and it's like, I wonder, what's the message you get about you here? demon child.
Demon child.
And you have her do a whole like kind of assembly and deepening work with this younger part of herself. And can she even begin to express compassion? You get her to do some of that. And then once she's resourced, then you got her to reach towards her partner.
And I bet you Dick Schwartz saw that work and saw how she shifted from calling herself demon child to kind of hugging that little girl. That's exactly what they're calling differentiation.
Yep. Yeah. A lot of overlap right there.
Yeah, a lot of overlap.
Did we get to all your notes?
Oh, yeah.
What's that?
Did we get to all your notes?
Yes.
Okay. Because I know I'm going to get this next email, so I just thought I'd jump into it now. Like, you're going to say, Ryan, why don't you like the idea of ownership? And I'll tell you why. I hear that a lot.
Can I ask you that?
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
always want to ask some questions too on this. So, Ryan, what is your big hang up with the word ownership?
Yeah, well, there is no hang up on what it actually means. It's in practice, because I hear that a lot. And you know, if you've been doing EFT for 10 years, you just close this episode out. But if you're in your first 4 or 5 years, I often hear people say things like the goal of stage 1 is get people to own their moves, and I cringe because it's already got you in misattunement. So you're starting off on the wrong side. I'm going to try to come after how you protect yourself without spending enough time tracking the function, validating enough on alliance. It's going to be a cognitive event, and you're actually going to increase resistance. So asking to take away my life jacket without replacing it with something, it doesn't work. So it has that shaming, misattuned impact. I want to affect ownership, not teach it.
Gotcha.
And
for my definition of ownership, it's all three of those elements. Right, that's full ownership. When you can see what are the good reasons you do it, what the healthy intent is, you get the impact to self and get impact to other. When you can do all of that, you can take ownership.
Okay, so ownership for you isn't just a third party.
No.
All right, well, that's an important distinction, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I mean, that's not the street definition of ownership by any means, but that's why it's an important discussion.
Absolutely.
But you're highlighting that there is a differentiation-like aspect to it. And I'd probably push back a little bit. You know, we're kind of given an attachment version of differentiation because you're still saying, well, I don't know. I guess differentiation does include relationship with other.
Differentiation doesn't make sense without attachment.
Right. It doesn't.
Doesn't make sense without attachment.
And I think a lot of differentiation people would agree with that. Yeah. But a hardcore differentiation would say it doesn't matter what anybody else does. You know, you love you for you. I just think that kind of goes against our mammalian instincts to want to be seen, want to matter, those sort of things. But it's a balance, right?
And this is where my faith kind of comes in. If I believe we're made in love, and it's about being in relationship with love, then co-regulation is our natural state, right? And we all have to do our own work. So it's not either or, it's an and both scenario. But yes, I couldn't agree with you more. That's why I love EFT, that we can contribute so much of this emphasis on co-regulation. But why limit our message to just that when we get out both?
Exactly, in a healthy way, you know.
In a healthy way.
Because we're not trying to push against the concept of it. Just we want to make sure that differentiation is in a way of kind of hedging our bets because we don't trust co-regulation, which would not be healthy for any human being, I think.
I'll say one more thing, and we can wrap up or whatever you all want to do, because I don't think EFT necessarily says this, but a fair amount of our participants leave trainings thinking that we're saying this. Because if your view of attachment is other people need to respond to you really well, or else you can't be happy.
Ooh.
Now you've left people in a victim seat.
That's good.
Right, and that's toxic. And now it's like you've led them into, you just need the world to treat you better to be happy. That's a really misuse of attachment.
Yeah, it all comes from a historical context. We had to separate ourselves from a field that focused on differentiation, so we highlighted co-regulation, and people get the impression that that's the only thing we're selling. Right? And I never even used the word differentiation for at least the first 10 years I taught EFT.
Yeah.
But again, Sue always wanted this model to grow.
Yeah.
It's to make the implicit explicit. Why this is some of the implicit that we've all been working with, we just haven't said directly. So I think this is in staying true to actually what the model's saying.
Yeah. I agree. Y'all, good conversation. Thanks, George, for being here. Ryan, thank you for being brave and leaning in. Ryan's been sitting on this topic for about 2 years or so. I really appreciate his kind of caution to not cause confusion, but just to still want to lean into an important conversation.
And I love that you two are willing to push those leading edges. It's a gift that you're giving our community, and just the rich dialogue and the kind of endless kind of trying to improve focus. It's just really been a cool thing to be a part of.
All right, so we get one last thing then. We always thank our therapists.
There you go.
So we want to say thank you, therapists, for doing this hard work. I mean, look at what all you're having to balance. Not only someone sitting across from you who's often upset or hurt, now you're having to work through all these 57 theories you're taught, and we're supposed to attach and differentiate. So thank you for holding all this tension, therapists. We appreciate you.
Yeah. I want to thank you for being willing to be compassionate with people when they can't be compassionate with themselves. I think that goes to a little bit of what we were talking about, where there are so many times it's one thing to help people. It's hard with people fighting with each other, but what about when I'm fighting myself, and you got to get someone to look at themselves and and befriend themselves and get curious. So I just want to thank you for holding compassion for clients who sometimes don't even have compassion for themselves.
This is a humbling job, as you both say, but that you're willing to enter this space knowing it could trigger all the worst in us, and we keep doing it. It's a pretty brave thing to do. So thank God for therapists.
Yeah.
Thank you, George.
Sure. Thank you.
All right.
You all keep pushing the leading edge for you and your clients so you can have success in vulnerability.
Thank you for listening. We hope this experience helps you push the leading edge in your work to help people connect with themselves and with each other. Please subscribe to our podcast and leave us a 5-star review. You can contact us at pushtheleadingedge@gmail.com, and you can follow us on our Facebook page at Push the Leading Edge. You can follow Ryan on Facebook at Ryan Rana Professional Training, and on his website, ryanranatraining.com. You can follow James on Facebook and Instagram at DocHawkLPC. You can also check out his website, DocHawkLPC.com.